Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I want to talk to you about Amazon's entry-level Kindle and why I think it's the best Kindle for most people. So anyone who's watched the channel for any length of time will probably know that I am a Kindle addict. So as well as this, the Kindle Basic, which I got a couple of weeks ago, I've also got a Kindle Paperwhite Signature Edition, I've got a Kindle Oasis 3, and I've got a Kindle Scribe. So I've got all of the Kindles that are currently available from Amazon. As I said, this one, the Basic, is the one I've got most recently, and I have been seriously impressed by it. It felt like a slightly strange decision to buy it when I got it, given that I've already got Kindles that are on paper at least more capable. But I really wanted to give it a try, and I'm really glad I got it because A, I think it's a fantastic device, and B, it just works really well for me in some situations. So this is Amazon's most affordable Kindle. It currently retails in the UK for £85, and for that I think it's a very good buy, and it's also frequently on sale. In fact, I just looked and today you can get it for £65, which is an absolute steal. So when I think about entry-level devices as opposed to more premium devices, I normally think about, two things where I will notice a difference. So the first one is build quality. So cheaper devices, they don't use such premium materials and they usually feel a bit cheaper. The second one is performance. So for a Kindle, that's going to be things like, screen resolution, the speed of the page turns and things like that, and the battery life. If you think about phones, which are, a device that all of us are very familiar with, a cheaper phone will usually do the same stuff as a more expensive phone, but it may not feel as good in the hand, and it may not do those, may not run the apps and things like that quite as smoothly, and it may have a lower resolution screen. And that's broadly true for Kindles as well. But I think with modern technology generally, things have advanced so far, and because companies are, iterating their devices year on year, they've managed to refine things to the extent where even the cheapest devices are fantastic. And they almost have to really justify the extra money you would spend on a more expensive device and really sell you on the things that make it better. And I think, with the Kindle now, for everyday reading, the gap between what something like the Paperwhite or the Oasis does versus what the most basic Kindle does is so narrow now that like I said at the start, I think for the majority of people, this Kindle will be more than good enough. So let's talk about those two things then. So firstly, build quality. So yes, this definitely does feel cheaper than my other Kindles. It's quite plasticky. You can see the kind of plastic finish on the back there. And if you tap it, it's got a kind of slightly plasticky, hollow sound to it. But actually, when you're reading on it, you don't notice that at all. The other thing that's a difference from the Paperwhite, for example, is that the screen on this, the basic Kindle, isn't flush. You can see there the screen is slightly recessed, whereas on the Paperwhite it's completely smooth. But to be honest with you, that really doesn't make that much of a difference. Performance-wise then, the really important thing that Amazon have done with this new version of the basic Kindle is they've increased the screen resolution. So previously, the screen resolution on the basic Kindle was 167 ppi or pixels per inch, whereas on the other Kindles it was 300. And that is quite a difference. And it made the basic Kindle not as pleasurable to read on as the more expensive devices. This new one, they bumped up that screen resolution to 300 pixels per inch. So the screen is very, very similar now to the screens on the other devices. There are a couple of differences, which I'll talk about in a bit. But really, apart from the size, so this is a 6-inch screen. The Paperwhite has a 6.8-inch screen, so slightly bigger. Apart from that, there's hardly any difference. And when I'm actually reading on the device, I really don't notice a difference. So the other important factors of performance then are like just the speed of use. And as you can see here, there is a slight difference between the basic and the Paperwhite, but it's only very slight. And when you are actually reading on the device, when you're just turning the pages rather than opening new books, it's pretty much indistinguishable. That really, the difference in whatever processor they've put inside this compared to the one in the Paperwhite, it really doesn't feel like it's going to make a difference for day-to-day use. The one area where the Basic definitely does feel more basic though is battery life. So I've read about 3 books on this now since I got it, and the battery is down to 16%. I would expect on my Paperwhite to have only gone down to kind of 50% probably, if that. So the battery life on the Paperwhite and on the Scribe is definitely a lot better than on this, the Basic. That said, the Oasis, which in theory is a more premium device than the Paperwhite, I've always had problems with the battery life on that. I've had 2 separate Oasises. I sent the first one back, and the battery life on the second one was just as bad. And to be honest with you, the battery life on the Oasis is probably about the same as the battery life on this, if not even a bit worse. So yeah, battery life is one area where this does lag behind the Paperwhite. But you can still read 3 books on it between charges, so that's pretty decent. So I said earlier that Amazon really need to justify to you why you should be spending more on one of the other devices. So let me just talk you through the things they do to justify that additional expense. So I've already talked about screen size. So the screen on the Basic is smaller than the Paperwhite. I don't really think that makes a huge difference. It is a difference, but it doesn't make a huge difference. The other difference, as I've said, is battery life. So the battery life on the Basic is definitely worse. But the other things I think are much less tangible things. So the Paperwhite Signature Edition, which is the one that I've got here, has adaptive brightness. So these devices have front lit screens, so you can read them in the dark. With the Paperwhite, or the Paperwhite Signature Edition at least, I don't think the standard model of the Paperwhite has this. That screen brightness adapts depending on the kind of ambient brightness of where you are. But to be honest, I've always found that Kindles do a really bad job of changing their brightness. They're certainly not nearly as good at doing it as phones are. So I don't think you're really giving much away by not having that as a feature. The next thing in then is the warmth of the screen. So one of the things that you can do with the Paperwhite is adjust the screen warmth. So you can see here you get these sliders. So you've got one for brightness, and you do get that one on the Basic, but you've got one for warmth as well. So you can make the screen, if I can actually do it, yeah. So you can make the screen kind of whiter, or basically kind of more yellowy or brown, which can be kind of easier on your eyes, if you're reading at night, things like that. But to be honest with you, it was only when a commenter pointed it out to me that the Basic doesn't have that feature that I realised it didn't have it, and that's basically because I never used that feature. It's kind of nice to have, but it's definitely not essential. One that may be more of a deal breaker for people is that the Basic isn't waterproof. So the Oasis and the Paperwhite are both waterproof. So you can read them in the swimming pool on holiday. You can read them in the bath. If you're walking in the rain, if you're someone who reads when they walk, then you don't have anything to worry about. The Basic is not waterproof at all. Is that a big problem? For me, not really. So I do sometimes read on my Paperwhite in the bath, but to be honest with you, I'm not someone who has baths very often anyway. I normally have showers, and I wouldn't read in the shower. So yeah, I don't think it's that big a deal. If you're someone who's mostly going to be reading on holiday, and I know there are a lot of people who do the majority of their reading when they're on holiday. So if you're going to be reading around the pool and things like that, maybe having the waterproofness is something you worry about. But it's always felt to me like a nice to have feature on Kindles rather than an essential. I think for mobile phones, you could argue it's a nice to have for mobile phones. We lived quite happily for ages without having waterproof mobile phones. I think it's probably a bit more necessary for mobile phones because I think you're more likely to use them in situations where they could get wet. But Kindles, you're very much making a choice about it. So it's only if you're going to be, you're going to be wanting to use it, by the pool, in the bath, that waterproofness is something you should really be thinking about. And that really is the only differences between them. Build quality is not quite as great. The Basic isn't waterproof, it doesn't have adaptive brightness, it doesn't have the ability to change the screen warmth, the battery life is not quite as good, and the screen is slightly smaller. But apart from that, as I said, for day-to-day reading, for actually using it for what it's intended for, it's just as good as the Paperwhite, in my opinion. I really think, if you are shopping for a Kindle, getting the most basic, getting the basic model is a really good bet. I don't think the Paperwhite really justifies itself anymore. Versus the previous version of the Basic with the lower resolution screen, I think it was a much easier decision, and the Paperwhite was quite an obvious choice. But now I don't see that at all. And it must be said, the Basic has one other feature which I think is fantastic, and that is its size. So the fact that it has a smaller screen and is a smaller device is brilliant. And I have found that I'm loving the smaller size of it because I can literally put it in my pocket. And what that means is when I go out of the house, I can easily slip this into my pocket. The other day I was out with my wife shopping. She was looking at makeup. I just pulled my Kindle out and started reading on it, and it was fine. So it really does work as a more portable device than the Paperwhite. The slightly smaller size, I think, makes a really big difference. You can see there, it's quite noticeably smaller. But when you're actually reading on it, it doesn't necessarily feel that much smaller. So I think that is a really big plus for this smaller one that you should think about when you're making the decision about which Kindle to get. So when I put up my unboxing video for the Kindle Basic a week or so ago, I asked people to put in the comments any questions they might have that I could answer in this video. I've got 3 of those to go through with you. So Jay Van Sickle asked if I felt that the contrast and readability on the Basic was better than on the Paperwhite. I think they're the same. I really can't tell a difference between the two of them. Chris Dobson asked, does this version of the Kindle allow you to invert the backlight? And yes, it does. So you can see you can put it into kind of night mode, so you get a black screen with white text rather than the other way around, if you prefer that. So you can do that just as you can on the other Kindles. And then the studio in the library asked, do you need to have Prime membership to buy or download Kindle books? So no, you don't. You don't need Prime membership at all. All you need to have done is bought the Kindle and bought the book from Amazon, basically. So you don't need Prime membership. There is a benefit to Prime membership, which is that there's 2 benefits. So you get what I think they call it Prime First, where at the beginning of each month you get to pick one free book, which is like a new release that Amazon themselves are releasing as a Kindle book. So they don't tend to be amazing, to be honest with you, but I've had a couple of interesting things through that. And then there is also a Prime, I think they call it like the Prime Lending Library or something like that, where you can borrow books from a fairly small range, but you can borrow books to read on your Kindle. I think you can borrow 1 a month. The bigger benefit comes from Kindle Unlimited, which is a separate thing that you can get, which is chargeable. I think it's £8 a month, where there's a much wider range of books that you can borrow, and there isn't a limit on how many books you can read in a month. And there is some interesting stuff on Kindle Unlimited. A lot of the really big titles aren't there, but there is a load of self-published stuff, which often I think is very interesting. And you sometimes see books of the kind that big publishers might be a bit wary about publishing because they need to meet their bottom line, don't they? Whereas indie authors can be a bit more experimental with things. So I think Kindle Unlimited is worth checking out, and when you buy a new Kindle, you usually get 3 months of Kindle Unlimited free to give it a try. So I hope you found that interesting and useful. As I say, I think the Kindle Basic is now good enough that for most people it's all the Kindle you need. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if you've got any questions. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.